Welcome to the Mental Health Multiverse.
We're your hosts, HB and LB. If you're also on a healing journey and enjoy pop culture, stick around.
Hello, and welcome to the first episode of season 3 of Mental Health Multiverse. I am HB here with my co-host LB, and this season we are talking about Disney villains. Woo! But before we dive into any specific Disney villain discussion, we want to give you a recap because we have, in our previous 2 seasons, we have covered empowering Disney heroines and we have covered self-reflective animation. And in both of those seasons, villains came up a lot. So the villains from the movies that we talked about are in those episode discussions. We will not be talking about those villains in this season because they've kind of been discussed already in a way. So in this episode, we're kind of giving you both what to expect, what's coming in season 3, and also a little recap of the villains we've already touched on. So
yeah, exactly. And you may be wondering, why villains? Why talk specifically about Disney villains? And my answer to that is just my boyfriend, hi Nate, pointed out that in season 1, when we were talking about empowering Disney heroines, we touched a lot on villains, and he just made a comment that it'd be kind of cool if we explored villains a little more. And I kind of threw the idea to HB, and here we are.
Yes, and I wanted to do a season on villains because it is the fall. This is our fall/winter season, I suppose. Yeah. And I'm very excited to talk about some specific spooky sort of Halloween themed villains around Halloween. That makes me very excited. There are some perhaps non-traditional Disney villains on this list that you might be like, why are you talking about that person? And for me, it's because we're doing it in October and we're talking about spooky things around Halloween because Halloween is my favorite. So that's why for me.
Exactly.
But also, I do think that villains are an interesting lens to look at things through because a lot of villains, as we will discuss throughout this episode, have a reason for why they behave the way that they do. And so we'll kind of be looking at things through a psychological perspective of why the villain maybe behaves the way that they do. And again, a quick note, neither myself nor LB are mental health or, professionals in that regard. So we will be discussing it from our own lenses of experience and thought. Hopefully we do that justice.
I was just going to add, we're not here to diagnose. We're not here to throw out labels. We're not here to say, if you identify you're a bad guy, you're a villain. As we go through the season, I'm sure there's going to be many moments where I'm LB, where HB and I are we relate. And then also just on the note of being trauma informed, that just because we can understand why someone does the things they do doesn't excuse them for their behavior, but it can help us foster a little bit more empathy and compassion, maybe even toward ourselves, not even toward the people who have wronged us or anything. So those are some of the lessons I'm looking forward to kind of gleaning from villains this season and in our discussions, both myself and HB. And we also have plans for some special guests, which I am very, very excited about. What's really, really cool is a lot of these guests actually have asked to come on to talk about these characters specifically. So before we spoil the list and tell you all of the villains we're planning on talking about this season, we're going to do a quick recap of some villains we have already talked about, and you can find them in their respective episodes. So we've touched on Hades, love him, Mother Gothel, Frollo, hate him, Madame Germain from Cinderella, Dr. Facilier from Princess and the Frog, the Evil Queen, Ursula, Beast ? Because he was kind of a villain, but not really. He was the antagonist, but not necessarily a villain.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And we kind of touched on the whole Stockholm syndrome thing in the Belle episode. So if you're interested,
and that was a really great conversation. Not Stockholm syndrome, check out the episode to learn more. Okay, we also talked about Jafar, Queen of Hearts a little bit, Maleficent, and Ernesto de la Cruz. And in that conversation, we kind of put him at the very top of like our most evil villains list. So
yeah, he's like tied with Frollo. I always say
Froyo.
Froyo.
I think we were calling him Froyo throughout the episode too, because you know,
I just see the double L and I want to yo, you know?
and you want to yo. YOLO. Anyway.
Here is what we are going to be discussing in this season, in season 3. We have some points that we'd like to focus on as we talk about each villain. So we've got their background and motivation. So why, who, what, when, where, why. Personality traits, their childhood and trauma, which sometimes are related, but not necessarily. Their relationships, their coping mechanisms. Is there anything unhealthy? Do they have unhealthy coping mechanisms that they use to deal with their emotions? Are there moments where they show vulnerability or a desire for something more, like a connection? Redemption and change. Is there potential for redemption in this character? What would need to happen for them to change? And how they respond to moments of crisis or turning points in their story. And then societal influence. How does society's perception and treatment of the villain contribute to their identity and actions? And are there societal pressures or stigmas that influence their behavior? And I love all of those questions.
Yeah, I'm excited.
I'm so excited too. So if you're curious, these are the villains that we will be discussing this upcoming season. We've got King Magnifico from Wish, Scar from The Lion King, Cruella from 101 Dalmatians. We might also touch on the Cruella movie just a little bit. Yzma from Emperor's New Groove, Captain Hook from Peter Pan, and again, we might touch on Hook a little bit. The Sanderson sisters from Hocus Pocus, hence we're getting into spooky season now. Calabar from Halloween Town. That's the one that everyone's going to be like, what? Why?
Why?
Oh, never mind. Okay. But Prince John from Robin Hood. Madame Medusa from Rescuers. Ratigan from The Great Mouse Detective. Madame Mim from Sword in the Stone. Shere Khan from Jungle Book. And Oogie Boogie from Nightmare Before Christmas.
Woo! And if you're wondering,
those
like,
are our
why
villains.
isn't Oogie Boogie in October? Because it's both a Halloween and a Christmas movie, yeah.
Yes, and this season goes all the way up until close to Christmas. So
yeah, through
very
the
exciting.
holidays, a lot of holidays going on there. Lots to celebrate. Season 3 of Mental Health Multiverse, all of the various holidays between now and then. And
yes,
we are excited to have you on for the ride.
Yeah, if you're interested in any bonus or additional content, make sure to join our Patreon, where we have viewing notes every time we watch a movie, focusing through the lens of this podcast. We take notes, and we can't get to all of our notes in a single podcast episode. So we post that in our Patreon. We also have some cutting room floor edits that don't make the podcast that we post over on Patreon. Behind the scenes and bloopers are on our Patreon. So make sure you check all of that out. You can join for as little as $20. So
like the Spanish flair on that. Okay.
yes, it's more interesting. It's because I said Froyo, you know.
Your brain is stuck in the double L's.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So that's what you can look forward to season 3. If there's a villain that perhaps is not on our list and you're like, hey, throw it in there. And if we have the time and means to do so, we can try. Feel free to email us at mhm.thepodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on TikTok and now Instagram, both at mhm.thepodcast. Our TikTok actually may not have the dot. I'm not sure. Anyway, MHM the podcast somewhere. MHM.thepodcast somewhere else. You know, we're just all over the place.
Consistency is key.
We're doing great. It's okay.
We're doing great. Yes, we're doing our best, and that's all we can do. But we appreciate you for listening and get excited for season 3, just like we are.
Woo. All right. See y'all for the next episode. Bye.
Bye.